All right, welcome back, everyone. Next keynote speaker, you'll all recognize Chris Henderson with the Canadian Coast Guard, and I'm really happy to introduce our convener for this segment of the conference, Cara Salchi with Thales Canada. Now, a few words on where she's coming from. She's the Vice President of Strategy and Government Relations, and Cara leads Thales Canada's government relations activities across all of its business lines, including defense and security, space, aerospace, digital identity, and transportation. But more importantly to the CDA Institute, Cara's been an ally ever since Thales joined us, I guess 2 years ago now. And I think that what we get with our relationship with Thales is the thought leadership side to it. And I know that Cara participated recently in an event that we hosted when Louise Arbour was working on her external review. So it's actually really interesting to be able to connect the dots this way. And so thank you, Cara, for being there throughout and for your thought leadership on these questions and for your support. Over to you.
Thank you, Yuri, and to the CDA Institute for the opportunity to convene this next session. When it comes to keeping nations safe and secure, the defense and security sector carries a tremendous responsibility. Truly, there is no sustainability without stability. All organizations must draw on their unique skills and expertise to focus on the areas where they can make the biggest contribution. Thales's purpose of building a future we can all trust includes helping to build a safer, greener, and more inclusive world. We believe that social value can be deployed in a number of ways, from supporting local employment, certifying our engineers in eco-design principles, to committing to reduce our CO2 emissions to net zero globally by 2040. We innovate for customers with critical missions and big ambitions, and we draw on science and technology every day to not only deliver, but also deliver in ways that create a smarter and more sustainable future. As the electronic systems integrator for the Coast Guard's newest fleet of vessels, we know that sustainability is a vital consideration as they embark on more missions and more operations in precarious conditions to ensure Canada's safety, security, resiliency, and sovereignty. We look forward to our ongoing collaboration and to support the Coast Guard in that evolving process of innovation and transformation. With that, I'm honored to introduce you to our next keynote speaker, Mr. Chris Henderson, Deputy Commissioner Operations of the Canadian Coast Guard. And to our moderator for this session, Megan Martins-DePonte, who's a research coordinator at the CDA Institute. Deputy Commissioner Henderson originally joined the Canadian Coast Guard as Director General National Strategies in May 2016. He then returned in 2020 after serving a couple of years as the Assistant Deputy Minister, Public Affairs at the Department of National Defense. Before joining the Coast Guard in 2016, Deputy Commissioner Henderson held senior leadership positions at Canada Border Services Agency and the Privy Council Office. After having served a distinguished 20-year career with the Royal Canadian Navy. Over to Megan. Megan is a Master of Strategic Studies candidate at the University of Calgary's Centre for Military Security and Strategic Studies, and she will be pursuing her doctoral studies this fall at Carleton University. Megan's research interests include sea power, Arctic security, and the military applications of emerging technology. In addition to her studies, Megan is a graduate fellow with the North American and Arctic Defense and Security Network, and she has received the Arthur J.E. Child Master's Scholarship and the Center for Military Security and Strategic Studies Graduate Research Scholarship. That's a mouthful, Megan. Congratulations. Megan is also an alumnus of the 2018 NATO Field School and Simulation Program at Simon Fraser University. Megan, over to you, and welcome to Chris Henderson. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Cara. It is my immense pleasure to introduce the Deputy Commissioner of Canadian Coast Guard Operations, Mr. Chris Henderson. Mr. Chris Henderson is an accomplished senior executive with over 30 years of experience in national security and public safety, and I'm thrilled that he has taken the time to speak with us today about the climate security nexus from the perspective of the Canadian Coast Guard. And with that, over to you, Chris.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Megan. Thank you, Kara. It's great to see you both today. And I'd like to start by thanking the CDA Institute for convening this event today. It's a real honor to be here. It's an inaugural event of this conference, and I wish you all very well, and I hope to see this in the future too. So thank you very much for the invitation. It's a privilege to be here. So it's my pleasure to add the Canadian Coast Guard's voice to the conversations taking place during this conference. It wasn't so long ago that many people had trouble just connecting the dots between security and climate change, but I think it's pretty evident today that that is certainly no longer the case. Il est maintenant évident que les gouvernements doivent se préparer aux répercussions des changements climatiques sur la sécurité et y faire face. Aujourd'hui, je souhaite me concentrer sur l'avenir de la garde côtière dans le contexte des changements climatiques. J'aborderai également la façon dont notre mandat et nos activités peuvent renforcer la sécurité dans l'Arctique, compte tenu du fait que les effets des changements climatiques ont un impact disproportionné sur le Nord. Mais c'est sûr et certain que les tendances que j'expliquerai appliquent également à travers le pays. Before I do so, however, I would like to echo the structure of Kim Rebenchuk's remarks, which I understand she gave about defense, which I understand she gave earlier today. And that is that from a Coast Guard perspective, the Arctic is strategically important as a focus for our work supporting sovereignty, sustainable development, the safety and security of its people, and also science. The Arctic pervades Canada's national self-image, despite most of us never actually having been there. And where some might see vast, empty, and unforgiving spaces, we now see numerous newcomers, including competitors. In that context, the Coast Guard's clear preference is to keep the Arctic a place of strategic cooperation where the rules-based international order has primacy, rather than a place of competition. But as I will delve into a little bit more later, that seems unfortunately to be receding into the past. Même si les considérations géostratégiques nous impactent, les changements climatiques affectent déjà nos opérations. Nous constatons une augmentation des dangers et des incidents graves liés à l'accroître de navires commerciaux, même aux conditions météorologiques. L'incident du Zim Kingston, au large de la côte du Pacifique l'automne dernier, est un excellent exemple. Les conditions météorologiques extrêmes peuvent également endommager nos actifs à terre qui nous permettent de communiquer, de surveiller le trafic maritime et de réaliser d'autres activités importantes. So, like the Canadian Armed Forces, the Coast Guard must make our infrastructure more resilient, we must design our ships differently, and we must adapt our operational concepts and procedures to remain safe and effective in a rapidly changing seascape. We also need to connect and collaborate with our partners more effectively to ensure the sum of our efforts is greater than our individual contributions. One new idea with great potential to facilitate that is the new NATO Center of Excellence on Climate and Security, to be hosted by Canada and slated to open by the winter of 2023. As NATO and Canada look to broaden and deepen the conversation around climate change-driven security to encompass the wide range of civilian activities that are appropriate, useful, and effective tools in the gray region below the threshold of armed conflict, the Canadian Coast Guard is in an ideal position to support these efforts. We have a long history of supporting the conservation and protection of our marine environment, as well as supporting law enforcement activity in Canadian waters. For instance, our people and equipment enable scientists from both government and academia to conduct aquatic and marine research, including Arctic science and hydrography. We also support enforcement actions against illegal fishing or overfishing, including unauthorized human activity in marine protected areas. As the most visible federal marine presence in the Arctic through activities like icebreaking, we fill a lot of space as an instrument of national power. and we provide the government with operational flexibility and a soft power approach to sovereignty. As I said earlier, NATO's new center of expertise is intended to broaden the discussion around climate and security, and it gives us a venue to work with like-minded partners as our role in the Arctic inevitably evolves. This conference is obviously taking place against the backdrop of Russia's unprovoked war against Ukraine. If the security situation vis-a-vis Russia and NATO continues as it is for a long period, then Canada's northern frontier will likely become more vulnerable than it has been since the 1980s. But there is much more to security than defending against Russian aggression. There is physical security in the Arctic. There is also food security, environmental security, and economic security. All of these are affected by the impacts of climate change. In the north, these impacts are amplified by the sheer logistics of supplying and sustaining a relatively small population amidst the tyranny of distance. Les résidents du Nord sont majoritairement des Inuits, des Premières Nations et des Métis, qui ont une relation unique avec la terre et la mer. Nous devons en tenir compte au même titre que les droits issus des traités et les revendications territoriales dans l'assemblée de nos activités. Nous savons également que ces gens souhaitent élaborer conjointement des solutions pour faire face au changement climatique. Nous pouvons tirer profit de nos relations avec les habitants du Nord pour faire progresser nos programmes et accroître la sécurité et la résilience dans le Nord. Les conditions météorologiques imprévisibles et les incidents imprévus peuvent retarder et même empêcher la livraison des biens essentiels, y compris de nourriture et de matériaux de construction. En outre, l'évolution des habitudes migratoires et d'autres changements dans les écosystèmes marins pourrait nous forcer à modifier les routes de navigation afin de protéger les populations d'espèces sauvages du Nord et les modes de vie traditionnels. Environ, ou peut-être seulement, 130 000 personnes vivent dans les 3 territoires du Nord canadien et dans le nord du Québec et du Labrador. Cela correspond à peu près à la population de Trois-Rivières. So it's a tiny population in a huge space. Most of these small communities are only accessible by air or from the water. And they get the bulk of their supplies through the annual summer sea lift. And it's the Coast Guard's job to break the ice and enable these supply vessels to reach Arctic communities. As the Arctic sea ice becomes less predictable, navigation becomes more difficult. This is also complicated by increased shipping traffic in the north due to longer shipping seasons and more tourism. With that comes an increased risk of marine incidents and security threats, including by non-state actors. We will have to increase our resilience to climate change, put in place mitigation measures to help Canada meet its greening commitments, and ensure Arctic communities continue to be served and secure. So just if we look at the Coast Guard's mandate, it includes marine search and rescue, ice breaking and ice management, marine pollution response, marine communications and traffic management services, the maintenance of aids to navigation, channel maintenance, and then supporting other government departments and agencies by providing ships, aircraft, and other services, which includes supporting anything from border enforcement to law enforcement, defense issues, or scientific research and conservation enforcement. C'est un mandat assez vaste, et j'aime à penser que nous faisons toutes des choses à la bonne façon. La pandémie a montré que nous sommes une organisation agile et souple. Les changements climatiques nous mettront sans aucun doute à l'épreuve à cet égard. Par exemple, nous devrons privilégier la navigation électronique au lieu de dépendre des aides physiques à la navigation qui sont très sensibles aux conditions météorologiques imprévisibles. Toutefois, la modernisation de nos services à la navigation maritime s'accompagne des menaces accrues en matière de cybersécurité contre lesquelles nous devons également nous préparer. Another area where we have a significant impact is in sharing our experience and expertise with other Coast Guard organizations. Unfortunately, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the two main venues governing international cooperation have been placed in suspended animation, which makes that useful exchange much more challenging. We don't know yet the long-term future of the Arctic Council or the Arctic Coast Guard Forum, but we do know that we need to preserve an on-ramp for a future return to constructive dialogue among all Arctic nations if possible. In the meantime, we are engaging bilaterally with other members of these bodies. And we take part in numerous international fora for Coast Guard cooperation, including the North Atlantic Coast Guard Forum and the North Pacific Coast Guard Forum. Sharing of information and best practices, along with climate data, to drive innovation will become more important than ever as the operating environment becomes more and more unpredictable. When it comes to adapting to climate change, we have no choice but to innovate. Excuse me. So we choose to make a virtue out of necessity. We have to think more laterally about our operations, and that is what we are doing. We've already developed new partnerships with Northern people, and we will continue to strengthen these partnerships. The boundaries of the Canadian Coast Guard's new Arctic region were defined in direct engagement with Northerners and their governments and land claim organizations. This also provides an opportunity to look at Northern-driven models for marine domain awareness. We also have an opportunity to work more closely with the Canadian Forces and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to safeguard Arctic security. Indeed, we have a very long history of sailing in partnership with the Royal Canadian Navy, and we began dialing that up in 2016 with the development of a joint Arctic concept of operations, which is increasingly relevant as we move closer to operating a common class of patrol vessels in the Arctic. And certainly there is always new technology to explore, although that clearly is a huge topic for another forum and another day. But generally we can do more. The Coast Guard's Arctic region is driving solutions for the North by the North, increasing the year-round presence of the Government of Canada, and co-developing programs and services tailored to the unique needs of the North. Now, there is no specific national security mandate for the Canadian Coast Guard, but in the context of supporting government agencies, we leverage our presence in the Arctic to support national security, including the collection of maritime domain awareness. Actually, to put a stronger point on it, no arm of the Government of Canada can afford to operate independently from any other if we hope to stand any chance at all of succeeding in being sufficiently adaptive and resilient in the face of climate change and the broad range of threats it is incubating. Nous modernisons notre flotte avec des navires plus polyvalents et multitâches. Nous compterons davantage de navires dotés d'une capacité de déglaçage, notamment grâce à la construction de 2 brise-glaces polaires, qui seront d'ailleurs en cours de construction et qui devraient être opérationnelles d'ici 2030. La garde côtière et le Canada bénéficieront ainsi d'une plus grande souplesse dans un contexte où notre mandat sera appelé à évoluer au cours des prochaines décennies. Notre flotte renouvelée nous donnera la possibilité d'être un acteur plus important dans les domaines de la science, de la défense et sécurité, de la gestion des urgences et de l'intervention environnementale. Looking beyond the horizon, operators of large vessels worldwide are starting to confront their own environmental footprints. We rely on diesel not just for locomotion, but to provide the necessities of life while we're at sea. Finding viable alternatives to diesel as a marine propulsion fuel will go a long way to decarbonizing marine shipping, both globally and here in Canada. But there is no silver bullet. Clear Seas recently published a short review of alternatives to diesel as a marine fuel, and I'm afraid it has to be said that the near-term picture is not reassuring if net zero is to be fully realized. There are numerous efforts underway, from biodiesel to compressed gases to small modular reactors. The Coast Guard is watching the evolution of marine propulsion fuel very closely. The solution is likely a mix of these options with the concomitant change management challenges that will come with any of them. And we are right now developing our operational fleet decarbonization plan, the first iteration of which is due in 2023, with the aim of meeting our net zero goals by 2050. To meet our government's climate commitments, we need to explore all of our options, including sharing information and best practices, as well as driving Canadian-made innovation with international partners. En résumé, le changement climatique constitue une réalité dont nous devrons désormais tenir compte dans toutes nos décisions, notamment en matière de construction navale, de formation, de nouveaux investissements dans les infrastructures et de création de partenariats. What is certain is that we will remain blessed with a rich northern culture, wide open spaces and abundant natural resources, and Canadians expect that we will protect that birthright. And certainly, and another certainty is that we will always have to economize for effort. So we have to innovate and transform to orient ourselves on these new and emerging challenges. By sharing data to inform decision-making and working with Canadian partners and like-minded nations, we can and we must achieve the level of safety, security, resilience, and sovereignty that will match up with Canada's vision for its future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Chris. At this time, I would like to move into our Q&A segment and would like to encourage the audience to submit your questions at this time. So a few questions to start us off, and I would like to focus upon a recurring theme found throughout your presentation, how the Coast Guard's operational posture is being dictated by climate change. You highlighted the importance of information sharing and domain awareness in an increasingly unpredictable operating environment. An independent review of the MV Marathasa fuel spill environmental response option was completed in 2015 and found that information sharing on a common network was not possible due to Government of Canada electronic policies and protocols. It was recommended that the Canadian Coast Guard discuss with partners the best platform for a common operating picture for sharing spill and environmental data. How has the Canadian Coast Guard since improved upon this capacity for networked operations, and what challenges still remain?
Thanks, Megan. That's a great question. It's a tough one too. I have to say there's been a lot of water under the bridge since the Marathasa spill in 2015. In fact, one of the principal responses of the government was the creation and implementation of what's known as, for those of us who aren't in Canada or not familiar with Canadian policy and government operations, in 2016, the Oceans Protection Plan was implemented by the Government of Canada. And that was very much, not solely, but certainly a direct outcome of what happened with the Marathasa. One of the things that did was put a very fine focus on the use of the incident command system, which is an internationally recognized methodology for dealing with crises and incidents of any nature. And it standardizes the way any response organization deals with an incident, so that whether you're in a military organization in the federal government, or you're a municipal first responder like the fire department, or you're a provincial jurisdiction like the Ministry of Natural Resources, you can, or in our case, and we've got lots of good examples since then, an Indigenous, a First Nations response organization, say on the west coast of Vancouver Island, everybody can come together, have a common way of speaking to each other and reporting out, and it creates a replicable, understandable command process. You have an incident command post, you have templated reporting forms, you have communications that are all done the same way, and it's made accessible to everybody. So the Coast Guard has put a lot of effort since then in expanding the use of the incident command system across the Coast Guard and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. We've put a lot of effort into training all of our partners on how to use it, and trying to disseminate its use as much as possible. frankly, we've had no choice but to put incident command system into action. And earlier on in my comments, I referred to the Zim Kingston, which was, again, for people who aren't familiar with it, it's a marine casualty that occurred in October of last year. A very large cargo ship got stuck in extreme weather, unusual extreme weather, believed to be a result of climate change. It lost 109 sea containers overboard, and the response was multi-level. Involved Canadian and American responders. It involved federal, provincial, municipal, and First Nation responders, including non-governmental organizations, and it was top-notch because people are getting used to a common way of interacting. We're also working closely with Transport Canada on something called Enhanced Marine Situational Awareness, which is more a portal for users to see what's going on. So that might be your common operating picture. People have access to a common picture that they can subscribe to, and in effect, it's open data that anyone can take a look at. So you can see who's coming and going. Now, that doesn't translate to a common platform for taking action when there's a response. We're working on something called the Communication Portal for Integrated Incident Response. This is I guess this would be a network-enabled incident command web-based platform. So taking what is currently analog incident command system that everybody understands and digitizing that. So we're working on that. So it's about getting everybody to speak a common language. It's about training them. And it's also about efforts that we've put into equipping communities with resources, with training, with tools to be able to be available, trained, and responsive when something bad happens. And inevitably something bad happens. But I'm pleased to be able to say that in the last few years, while there have been some difficult incidents, we have been getting better at the way we respond. We've been getting better at bringing together, to convening effective response organizations and getting them to work together.
Thank you so much. My next question. So the area of responsibility for the Canadian Coast Guard is extensive, given Canada's natural geography, features the world's longest coastline. You discussed the growing risk of marine incidents and security threats created by increased shipping seasons and tourism in the north. To what extent have changes in ice coverage increased the operational demands of the Coast Guard? And what efforts are being made to ensure that readiness and efficiency are not negatively affected as a result of this?
Yeah, boy, you have some pretty tough questions there. So one of I referred to the Oceans Protection Plan earlier. One of the important elements of the Oceans Protection Plan, when that was developed and implemented, was we extended the length of our summer icebreaking season. So for people that aren't aware of this, Canadian Coast Guard we don't know this for sure, but we believe that we're the only Coast Guard in the world that is doing icebreaking all year round. And we use the same fleet for all of that icebreaking. So we have, in the winter, we have our icebreaking fleet hard at work in the Gulf of St. Lawrence and St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes and off Newfoundland, so down south, so south of 60. Then they have a short period of time where they have to put in all their refit maintenance, and then they go north and they spend the summer icebreaking there. In the past, the season in the Arctic was very much dictated by ice coverage. And as the ice started to recede, our ability to provide services in the Arctic started to get limited by the number of ships we had and the amount of money we had to spend on sea days. In 2016, with the Oceans Protection Plan, a deliberate decision was made by the government to extend the season, the operating season of the Coast Guard in the Arctic. So what we call the shoulder season. So both in May, June, and in November, December, we have up to 20 more days of sea days, not 20 more days of operation in the calendar year, where we have our icebreaking fleet, so that we're able to be available for industry. We're available to do Arctic resupply. And late last year, there was a fueling supply mission that we weren't able to get done until late November. And it was the ability to have a longer season that really allowed us to be responsive when in the past we hadn't been able to. So that's part of what we're doing. We've expanded the length of our season. We're working, I alluded to the joint concept of operations with the Royal Canadian Navy. Another aspect of being better postured is being better connected to our partners. We put a lot of effort into working with the Canadian Armed Forces. My colleague Neil O'Rourke, who's the Assistant Commissioner for the Arctic region, perhaps one of his tightest professional relationships is with General Pascal Godbout, who is the commander of Canadian Armed Forces Joint Task Force North. So the Coast Guard and the Armed Forces are in lockstep, looking at planning and contingency planning and response in the Arctic. The renewal of our fleet is another big aspect of that. I mean, simply we have a good sized fleet, but it's getting old. We haven't had a major, we haven't had a shipbuilding program since, well, apart from the National Shipbuilding Strategy, which we have now, we didn't have a deliberate shipbuilding program since the 80s. So our icebreaking fleet was getting old, and so we're starting to recapitalize, which will allow us to be better postured and have that operational readiness that we require. So we're building a fleet for the future that is more, I'm looking for the word in English because the great word polyvalent in French just doesn't have an English equivalent. Multi-purpose, right? Our ships are going to be much more multi-purpose, multitaskable. We're proceeding with expanding a mission modularity capacity across all classes of ship, which means if you can picture, your standard sea container, whatever equipment that you can, whatever mission it is, if you can envisage putting it into a 20-foot sea or a standardized sea container, then we can drop that onto the back of a ship, plug and play with electrical connections and data connections, and it allows us to bring a ship into port, swap out its mission package, and get it back to sea within sort of 24 to 48 hours. Again, that will allow us to stay, relevant and ahead of the curve in terms of being postured properly to respond to whatever's going to happen up there. So you can have a search and rescue package, you can have an environmental package. We'll have better communications, better integration of communications. We'll have remotely piloted drones, and there'll be both aeronautical drones, quite possibly underwater drones as well. So we're looking at technology to also expand the range of operational effectiveness that we'll be able to have. But it's a lot of change, and it's a lot of bringing into operationalizing a lot of technology and a lot of new concepts that at the moment are nascent for us. So it's a heavy lift that we're focused very much on, and will be for the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Chris. I think it's so important looking towards the future. That's such a promising answer, the flexibility, because these platforms, you want to avoid mission and technological obsolescence.
Right.
I'm going to move into our audience questions. So I have our first one from Routers. What are the security risks of Russia currently holding the chairmanship of the Arctic Coast Guard Forum and paused engagement?
Well, I think the the thing about the Arctic Coast Guard Forum, just to start out with, because I need to be precise in the words here. The Arctic Coast Guard Forum is not a forum where there is a security dialogue. It's a place where we have a safety dialogue. The Arctic Coast Guard Forum has assiduously avoided, and all of the parties to the Arctic Coast Guard Forum, Foundation, agreed that they would not have a security dialogue at the Coast Guard Forum. It's a place to talk about how to do search and rescue better, how to do environmental response better, how to coordinate our activities more effectively. But it is not a security space. In fact, when there have been efforts to inject security related discussion points or even security related scenarios into exercises, because the Coast Guards that make up the forum actually do operate together and exercise together. Canada in particular, because we are uniquely the only Coast Guard in the group that is not an armed, it's neither a military organization nor a law enforcement organization, and all the rest of them are. And so we have been very clear that we won't allow a security dialogue to take place. That's the caveat to the question, to my answer rather. But what the Arctic Coast Guard Forum did provide, it provided a safe place for all of the Arctic coastal nations to get together on a regular, predictable basis and talk about the things that we have in common. And it's the same principle underpinning the Arctic Council. Having a place where you can speak frankly with your colleagues, even in subject areas where you don't necessarily agree, but you're going to be operating in the same space. You've got to be able to have a place where you can have that kind of a dialogue. So, it's not inherently that it was a Russian chair that made things problematic. It's that Russia unprovoked attacked Ukraine, and then that forced the Arctic Council, in order to deal appropriately with that, to respond appropriately to it, they suspended the work of the Arctic Council, and then subsequently the Arctic Coast Guard Forum put its activities on hold. But like I said earlier, our interest is in making sure that we can continue the important work that the Coast Guard Forum represented amongst partners that are still adhering to the international rules-based order, mindful of the fact that we need to maintain an on-ramp for the future so that we can get back to that place of cooperation and collaboration. But also, like I said, it remains to be seen when that's going to happen. So I know that's kind of a long answer. I think reverting to the caveat that it's not a security forum, but the impact of its suspension on security is there are fewer places where we can have frank conversations about things that we have in common.
Thank you, Chris. So another one from the audience. To your point of all must work together, there has been an increase in training activity between the Royal Canadian Navy and the US Navy in Alaska. Does the Canadian Coast Guard plan to increase tandem training in these areas with the Royal Canadian Navy, or does the Canadian Coast Guard have its own plan to increase capability through training in these areas?
Well, thanks for that question. Like I mentioned in my remarks, we've had a very long and mutually beneficial relationship with the Royal Canadian Navy, many people will have heard Admiral Ron Lloyd, at times the previous commander of the RCN, say something like, the Coast Guard and the Navy are clear shipmates, and we think that we certainly act and feel like we've been shipmates for a very long time. We already are, and we don't just have plans to increase the amount of training and operations that we do together. We're already doing so. There's extremely, as I mentioned, between the Assistant Commissioner in the Arctic region and Joint Task Force North, there's a very strong connection. There's also incredibly strong connections with our Assistant Commissioners in the Atlantic and Western regions with their regional counterparts. We are partners in managing Canada's search and rescue regime. So that is a joint responsibility that we execute in such close collaboration that, I mean, you can't imagine an operational, two operational entities actually working more closely together, more effectively every single day of the year across the country than in the search and rescue domain. But we also are, we have active plans to do, participate in exercises and operations wherever we can. One of the challenges that we face in the Coast Guard, speaking quite frankly, is that, we don't have a lot of excess capacity. So when I listed through the mandate that the Coast Guard has, and I think about icebreaking and buoy tending and search and rescue and environmental response, these are programs that demand ship time, planned ship time for basically every hull in the Canadian Coast Guard every day of the year. So it's exceedingly difficult for us to take a ship out of the line to go and participate in an exercise in any kind of ad hoc way. It has to be planned well in advance. And so that unfortunately kind of reduces the amount of time that we have to be very precise and deliberate about selecting what joint exercising that we will do with our ships. But we do a lot still. So if I'll give you a couple of concrete examples. Both the Royal Canadian Navy and the Canadian Coast Guard will be operating a common class of Arctic patrol ships. And the Navy has the first couple of them already in hand. And knowing that we're going to get the 7th and 8th ones that get built, we've already started putting coasties into the Royal Canadian Navy Arctic and offshore patrol ships to ride along, to learn how the systems work, see how the machinery works, see how the ship handles, and the Navy, vice versa, has for a very long time been putting bridge watch keepers and folks in our ships to learn how to navigate in the ice, how to operate in ice-infested waters. Because I can tell you, from having been in the Navy, that the idea of being in a relatively thin-skinned warship in ice-infested waters, it frankly is terrifying. So when you're bumping around in the ice and you're hearing the crunching and the grinding, it's not a natural feeling. So they've been coming to us and learning about ice navigation and how to operate in ice-infested waters. That goes on all the time. And we have very deep connections with the United States Coast Guard. A question that wasn't asked, but I'm going to infer that might have been implied, and I'll add that to my answer. In fact, 2 weeks from now, we'll be meeting with the senior leaders of the U.S. Coast Guard for our annual Canada-U.S. Coast Guard Summit. And yes, when, last winter, when the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Healy transited through the Northwest Passage, we were with them, and we did a search and rescue exercise together. And this summer, during Operation Nanook, and when the British ship HMS Protector is going to be up in the Arctic, we'll be with them. We'll be with the Royal Navy, we'll be with the Royal Canadian Navy. If the Americans come through, or we can coordinate it, we'll operate with the U.S. Coast Guard. Because, as I said, we can't afford to operate independently. We have to be joined up. We have to be seen to be joined up, and we need to maximize our contributions collectively, because, working together in the Arctic is a clear sign of our intent in the Arctic, Canada's intent in the Arctic, and working with our allies. in the Arctic is a clear sign of our collective intent in the Arctic. And so it's the water we swim in. It's our bread and butter.
Thank you. So just to follow up on that, in the event of a search and rescue incident, all agencies are expected to play a role when available. When we consider the Coast Guard's area of responsibility and remoteness of the Arctic region, this multi-level approach to search and rescue is needed. But we also need to consider the effects of climate change at home and the increasing demand placed upon Canadian Armed Forces domestically, as well as the Canadian Coast Guard. How much of this additional strain can be absorbed by this multi-level approach before it becomes detrimental to the Coast Guard's ability to fulfill its mandate? Could you speak to the key challenges and opportunities linked to climate change for interdepartmental cooperation on search and rescue?
Wow, that is a very good question. It's a tough one. Look, I don't want this to sound trite, but Canada is huge. And I don't think we really, those of us who are crowded down in the south end of the country, stretched along the border, it's huge in our minds, but I don't think that, it's hard to conceive of just how huge it is. And if there's one thing that keeps me up at night, it's thinking of those terrifying scenarios of a major search and rescue happening way up there in the north, where the response is just, it's going to be long. And it's going to take a long time to get there, and it's going to be hard to operate once you're there. So, the questioner has got their finger on the pulse of a huge challenge. We are investing more in it. We are looking again, talking about things the Oceans Protection Plan did. It established a search and rescue inshore rescue boat station in Rankin Inlet. We're looking to develop more of those. We are expanding the Coast Guard Auxiliary in the Arctic, the Indigenous Auxiliary in the Arctic, precisely to expand our capacity. The capability to do it is vested in the mariners who respond and the vessels they respond with in their training. The capacity to cover the enormity of our waterfront is really the long pole in the tent, so to speak. So we're doing more to engage with, to expand the auxiliary, to involve Indigenous communities more in the search and rescue regime. We're providing them with training, with vessels, with awareness and familiarity with the incident command system, although search and rescue is governed through established search and rescue protocols. There is an international convention that governs search and rescue in the Arctic that all of the Arctic coastal states have signed up to, and is part of sort of the main driver one of the main drivers of conversation at the Arctic Council's Emergency Preparedness, Prevention and Response Working Group, where the nations got together and worked through and exercised search and rescue response. And so we are working bilaterally now, but internationally, on making sure we stay honed with our search and rescue skills. There's experimentation going on. I'll give you an example with industry. The name of the cruise ship company escapes me right now, but the ship is called the Commandant Charcot. And last summer it did a trip to the North Pole, and it went up there with the clear intent of doing an exercise and practicing the use of new specialized search and rescue equipment. And there were Canadian Coast Guard personnel on board who were observing and participating in that activity. So we are engaged. We are connected with allies. We're connected with our own people here in Canada, with interdepartmentally, and we're expanding with Indigenous communities, and we are focused on the issue. That in no way, shape, or form, I don't want anybody to think that that means there's even a shred of complacency. We recognize how challenging it is to work there, and to deal with search and rescue issues in the Arctic. And if I can give a shout out to our colleagues over at the Department of National Defence, and in particular the Defence Research and Development Canada, they've done a study where they basically mapped the Arctic, broke it down into geocells, and that sort of permit them to explore options for the placement of infrastructure and resources to maximize effectiveness of search and rescue. Now they're thinking about helicopter time, how long it takes to fly from where their bases are, and then how to operate when they get there. And it's completely applicable in our context to look at using the same methodology to figure out where to place our search and rescue resources to better effect, so that we are, when you compare the geography with the trend lines that we're seeing, increasing shipping, increasing tourist shipping, and that sort of thing, where are they going, and where are we relative to our potential the people we need to rescue, and how do we make investments that will optimize our chances of success. It's a wicked problem, and it's one that nobody takes lightly, and there is no trite answer that says, yeah, we got it. It is genuinely the challenge that keeps me awake at night.
Thank you so much for that answer. So we have 8 minutes left, so I have time for a few more questions. So back to the audience, Russia and China are now developing nuclear war fighting capabilities that might allow a successful attack on North America. As the US integrated deterrence develops, their Coast Guard will be given a role in pan-domain awareness. What role will the Canadian Coast Guard play, and what should it be doing?
Well, if your question is what specific role will the Canadian Coast Guard play in a military-centric system, I would say very little, explicitly. Where the Coast Guard's value comes into play is that we, through the course of our business, we collect a massive amount of information about shipping, where it is, where it's going, what it's containing. We have, and we share that information through the Marine Security Operations Centers with a variety of Government of Canada departments, Transport Canada, the RCMP, Canada Border Services Agency, and the Canadian Armed Forces. Each of those organizations takes our information and adds another layer onto it, their own specific layers onto it. And in that way, our maritime domain awareness, the data that we provide, helps build a common operating picture. And then, other security agencies use that appropriately within their mandates. But it doesn't invoke Coast Guard involvement specifically. It's not, at this point in time, we have not been asked to contribute specifically to this pan-domain awareness capability, other than through the provision of the marine domain awareness that we already provide. Now, we are going to be getting, we're gradually investing more in that, so we can use, as I described earlier, our future fleet is going to be better equipped with sensors and with connectivity, with drones, with the ability to sense the environment they're in and feed that back into that maritime domain awareness picture. And then our partners will use that in accordance with their mandates, and we'll be happy for them to do so, and we'll do our level best to make sure we're giving them the most accurate data that we can on an ongoing basis so that they can do their jobs. And that's our job.
Thank you. So you mentioned a couple themes to tie together on the Coast Guard: protection of wild species, climate change, and gray zone competition below the threshold of armed conflict. China has expressed explicit interest in the Arctic, with minerals and fish stocks seemingly of particular interest. To what degree is the Canadian Coast Guard prepared to meet the challenge of China's industrial fishing fleets descending on vulnerable stocks near our Arctic shores?
Well, another tough question. Look, it's one of those things where this is a challenge that is in no way, shape, or form unique to Canada, and so you know, it will. The short answer to the question is our readiness to meet that challenge is directly proportional to our relationships and our interoperability and the way we work with like-minded nations and partners. The Coast Guard couldn't do it alone. We do have a lot of expertise in terms of fisheries conservation and protection. We're in the same department as the Conservation and Protection Service of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. We work with, we call them lovingly, we refer to them as the fish cops. We work with the fish cops all the time. They use Canadian Coast Guard ships to undertake Northwest Atlantic Fisheries Organization patrols. We work with them in Canadian fisheries, so we know and understand fisheries enforcement. We will contribute in terms of, you know, making sure that fishing that occurs is being done legally and with the support of CMP, Conservation Protection Officers, to help enforce those rules in Canada. We are doing some capacity building work in other countries to help them improve their ability to collect maritime domain awareness, so they're going to be able to better see where illegal fishing fleets are, and I think people understand that those fishing fleets aren't just in the Pacific, and they're not just going to be in the Arctic. They are literally around the world, scooping up, hoovering up fish from, you know, in the South Atlantic, off the east coast of Africa, you know, off the east coast of South America. They're everywhere. Again, working with partners. One of the things that the North Pacific Coast Guard Forum includes is an annual, there's an experts working group on fisheries enforcement, so that's ongoing, but it's a topic at our annual forum where all the North Pacific Coast Guards get together, and we talk about the scourge of illegal, unregulated, and underreported fishing. So far, it's been a challenge to, you know, halt that, because the stakes are so high, and so, you know, the question is spot on. The Arctic is going to be a place for the race for protein will be run in the Arctic, looking for fish stocks that are moving north with climate change. And again, like the Global Search and Rescue Challenge, this one is going to be one that we really you know, need to work together on to resolve. We might not be able to be as effective as we'd like, and there's certainly more that we need to learn about it, and capabilities we need to bring on board to be able to deal with it better.
Thank you. So it looks like we are out of time. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your expertise with us today. There were some tough questions. And thank you to all of our audience for showing up today for this important conversation.